The desert evening hung heavy, painted in bruised purples and dying gold. A hush swept across the brushland, broken only by the faint rasp of cicadas and the weary crunch of boots against dry leaves. The rancher moved slow, lantern in one hand, the other brushing aside thorny branches. He thought he'd come across another coyote snare, maybe a wounded animal caught in its misery. But then he froze. There, beneath a tangle of brush, wasn't an animal at all. A young woman lay crumpled in the dirt, half covered by leaves and broken branches. Her dress was torn, her skin marked with rope burns and bruises the color of storm clouds. Blood had dried along her temple, streaking her face like a cruel reminder of the hands that had struck her. Her lips parted, voice thin as a dying flame. "Finish it." "Now." The rancher's chest tightened. For a moment, he thought she was asking him to end her suffering. His lantern shook in his grip. "No," he whispered, crouching low. His voice carried the gravel of years and the weight of something deeper. "You hold on. You hear me?" She stirred, eyes flickering open just enough to see him. In their glassy depths lay not weakness but exhaustion, the kind born of betrayal. Her breath rattled, words trembling. "He left me." "To die," the rancher's jaw clenched. He reached out, pulling back the last of the branches, his rough fingers brushing against the ropes that still bound her wrists. When he cut them loose with his knife, she flinched. "Easy now," he murmured, steady and low, the way a man talks to a wild horse on the edge of bolting. "Ain't no harm coming from me." The girl's tears cut new tracks through the dirt on her face. Her body shook as she tried to push herself up, but the weight of days abandoned in the wild dragged her down. The rancher slipped his coat from his shoulders, draping it over her fragile frame. Then, with a strength born not of muscle but of conviction, he lifted her carefully into his arms. The lantern light caught her face as she sagged against his chest. She whispered one last word before unconsciousness claimed her. "Safe?" His voice was a vow. "With me. Always." The desert wind carried the promise into the night. The night stretched long and merciless, the kind of night where shadows grew teeth. As the rancher rode with the unconscious girl cradled in his arms, her mind sank back into the horror she had lived through. The memory came sharp and unrelenting. Her stepfather's hands, rough with drink and cruelty, shoving her down into the dirt. The stench of whiskey on his breath clung to her as he sneered. "No one wants you," he spat, tightening the ropes around her wrists until they cut deep. "Not the town, not the law, not even God himself. Out here, you're mine to bury." Her cries had split the still air, desperate, pleading. But the desert didn't care. Only the coyotes heard her, their howls rising like a cruel chorus, waiting for the feast to come. She'd begged him. "Please, I'll do anything." But he'd laughed, a dry and broken sound. With one last kick to her ribs, he'd left her lying beneath the tangled brush, whispering over his shoulder, "Let the vultures finish what I started." Hours blurred into days. The sun beat her down by day, the cold gnawed her bones by night. Every breath scraped her throat raw. Every drop of dew she tried to sip felt like ash. The insects came first, tiny claws crawling across her face. Then came the fear, the steady certainty that no one would ever find her, and so she prayed not for rescue, but for release. Back in the present, the rancher pressed his horse forward, urgency in every stride. He felt the way her body sagged against him, limp and trembling. He'd seen cattle dying of thirst, soldiers fading in war, but never had he seen a soul so close to giving up. "Hold on," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "You ain't done fighting yet." Her eyes flickered open just long enough to meet his. In that fleeting glance, he saw the scars of betrayal deeper than the bruises on her skin. She whispered, voice broken but defiant, "He left me." "To die." The rancher's face hardened, jaw set against the dark horizon. "Then he'll answer for it," he said, his words carved like stone. The horse carried them through the night, hooves drumming a vow into the earth. Somewhere behind them, the outlaw's cruelty lingered in the shadows, and somewhere ahead, a reckoning waited. The first faint light of dawn spilled over the horizon, painting the ranch in gold and ember. The wind whispered through the dry grass, carrying the scent of pine and hay. The rancher's horse trudged through the morning mist, each step deliberate, as though the earth itself knew the weight it bore. He carried her into the cabin, the wooden floorboards creaking under his boots. The fire had died overnight, leaving only embers that glowed weakly, but he knelt quickly, stoking them back to life. The warmth climbed the walls, brushing away the chill of night, and for the first time since she had been abandoned, she felt it, not safety, but possibility. Her body sagged into a chair. Trembling, arms wrapped around herself. Bruises marbled her skin. The harshness of rope burns a cruel reminder of the past. The rancher knelt beside her, his hands rough but careful, lifting a cup of water to her lips. She drank in slow, shuddering sips, each one washing a little of the desert fear from her lungs. "You'll be all right," he said, his voice low, carrying both authority and gentle reassurance. "Ain't nobody coming near you here." Her lips quivered. I thought—" "I know," he interrupted softly. "I know what he made you think. But that ain't real here. Not anymore." She glanced around the cabin, sturdy walls, lanterns hanging from hooks, a blanket folded neatly on the bed. It was a place of refuge, a world away from the thorny brush and dry dirt where she had been left to rot. For the first time, her breath didn't catch in fear. It came steady, shallow, hesitant, like a bird testing its wings. The rancher moved to the window, peering out at the sprawling fields. His jaw was set, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the outlaw who had tried to break her spirit. "You're safe for now," he murmured. "But we'll make sure it stays that way." She watched him, heart tight but grateful, and whispered, "Thank you." He only nodded, kind and steadfast. No grand speeches, no promises that words alone could not keep, only action, only presence, a shield against the cruelty she had survived. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and rain. It was a new day. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself a spark of hope, fragile but real. The rancher lifted her gently, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you some proper rest. Tomorrow we start fighting back, and with that," she let herself lean into his strength, the cabin now a sanctuary from the darkness that had haunted her so long. Night fell over the ranch like a velvet curtain, thick and heavy, carrying the scent of dust and pine smoke. Lanterns flickered in the windows, casting long, trembling shadows across the porch. The girl sat wrapped in a blanket, knees drawn tight, eyes wide as the wind whispered through the trees. Every crack of a branch sounded like footsteps, every distant howl a warning. Out beyond the fence, the outlaw prowled. His lantern bobbed between the shadows like a predator stalking its prey. He had not forgotten her, had not forgiven the insult of survival. Each step he took, boots sinking into dry dirt, carried the weight of old grudges and violence yet to come. The rancher moved silently to the doorway, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the tree line. His jaw was tight, his breath steady. "He's out there," he murmured, voice low, almost swallowed by the night. "Don't make a sound." From the darkness, a branch snapped under the outlaw's boot. The girl flinched, holding her breath. Lantern light glinted off the barrel of the rancher's rifle. "Not tonight. Not ever again," he whispered, tone sharp, protective. The outlaw's shadow moved closer, creeping along the fence line, voice dripping menace. "Thought you could hide her from me? She's mine. Always will be." The rancher's finger hovered on the trigger, heart hammering against his chest. The girl's fingers dug into the blanket, nails biting her palms. Dust swirled around the ranch house, kicked up by the restless horses in the barn, their fear echoing her own. A sudden howl broke the tension. Coyotes, or perhaps a signal from the outlaw's mindless cruelty. The man retreated a step, muttering curses, lantern swinging wildly. The rancher's shadow stretched long across the ground, a dark promise of retribution. Finally, the villain stepped back into the trees, swallowed by the night. The rancher lowered his rifle slowly, but his eyes never left the horizon. The girl exhaled, relief trembling through her, but her body remained tense, anticipating the next strike, the next moment of terror. Why does he keep coming? she whispered, voice hoarse. Evil doesn't give up easy, the rancher said, voice steady. It circles back. But we'll be ready, always. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves as if affirming his words. The ranch for now held its fragile peace. Lanterns flickered, shadows danced on wooden walls, and the girl, though shaken, felt the first spark of courage stirring within her chest. The night had not ended, but the first battle had been won. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the town in muted shades of gold and gray. The streets were quiet, dust rising in lazy spirals as the rancher guided the girl off his horse. Her legs trembled beneath her, but the blanket around her shoulders was a shield against the chill and the memory of what she had endured. The sheriff's office sat at the end of Main Street, wooden sign swaying in the morning breeze. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood, leather, and old paper, a sanctuary of law in a town that had seen too much chaos. The rancher knocked once, hard and deliberate. A gruff voice called from within, "What's your business here?" The rancher's eyes didn't waver. "Need to see the sheriff. Got someone who's been left for dead." The door swung open. Sheriff Hawthorne was a man carved from the same grit as the land itself. Broad shoulders, weathered face, eyes sharp and unyielding. "Bring her in," he said, voice carrying authority like a hammer striking an anvil. The girl moved slowly, glancing at the floor with each step. Her bruises were hidden under the blanket, but the ache behind her eyes told the story better than words ever could. She paused in the middle of the room, voice trembling. He left me. To die." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Tell me everything," he commanded. And she did, every detail spilling out in broken sentences, every name and threat, every cruel promise of her stepfather's twisted ownership. The rancher stood nearby, hands resting on the saddle leather of his belt, silent but unwavering. When the girl finished, the sheriff leaned forward, voice low and decisive. "He won't walk free another day." "Not in this town, not in my watch," the girl's lips quivered. "Do you really mean that?" Sheriff Hawthorne fixed her with a steady gaze. "A man like that answers for what he's done." "You're safe now. That's a promise." The rancher stepped closer, placing a rough hand on her shoulder. "We'll make sure he stays where he belongs," he said softly. Outside, sunlight spilled into the room, casting long shadows that seemed to carry away the darkness of the past night. The girl drew a deep breath, the first real one in days, and allowed herself to hope. The sheriff's words were more than law. They were a lifeline, a declaration that cruelty would not go unchecked. And as they left the office, the rancher guiding her back toward the safety of the ranch, the girl realized that justice had a shape, a name, and a face. For the first time, she felt it could reach her and protect her from the darkness that had haunted her so long. The ranch lay under a blanket of darkness, the kind that makes every rustle a threat and every shadow a looming shape. Lanterns glowed faintly in the windows, but their light seemed fragile against the wide, open night. The girl sat on the porch, blanket wrapped tight around her, listening as the wind whispered through the trees. Then, from the far edge of the field, a torch flickered. The outlaw had returned, and he wasn't alone. Shadows moved in the night like vultures circling prey. Horses in the barn stirred nervously, their hooves stamping against the floor. Ears pricked to the menace approaching. The rancher stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, silhouette carved against the weak glow of lanterns. His eyes scanned the darkness, calculating, steady. "Stay behind me," he said softly, voice a tether in the storm of fear. The gang advanced, shouting curses, brandishing crude weapons. The outlaw's laughter cut through the night like shattered glass. "Thought you could hide her? Thought you could make me fade away?" Flames licked at the barn doors as one of the men tossed a torch. Horses panicked, kicking and braying, their terror a drumbeat against the night. The girl's fingers dug into the railing, nails biting the wood, heart hammering against her chest. The rancher fired a warning shot. The sound cracked like lightning echoing across the fields. The gang faltered, muttering threats but slowing their advance. His stance was immovable, a dark sentinel standing between her and the darkness that had stalked her for so long. The girl whispered, voice barely audible over the chaos. He's not stopping." The rancher's jaw clenched. "No, but neither are we. He fired another shot, aimed at scaring, not killing. His movements were precise, controlled, every motion a promise of protection. Dust and smoke swirled around the porch as the outlaw cursed and retreated, dragging his gang back into the shadows. The fire burned low, leaving smoldering embers as evidence of their presence, a warning of what could come. The girl exhaled shakily, relief mingled with fear. Her hands trembled, but she realized she had witnessed something she hadn't thought possible, courage standing firm in the face of pure evil. The rancher lowered his rifle slowly, eyes never leaving the tree line. "They'll try again," he muttered, voice grim. "But we'll be ready." And in the hush that followed, the night seemed to hold its breath, knowing that a storm had passed, but the fight was far from over. The first pale light of dawn crept over the ranch, dust motes floating like tiny specters in the morning air. The night's chaos had left its scars, scorched earth near the barn, hoofprints deep in soft soil, and the lingering scent of smoke that clung to everything. The girl sat on the porch, blanket drawn tight around her shoulders, staring at the horizon with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Suddenly, the sound of thunderous hoofbeats rolled across the fields. The rancher's head snapped toward the noise, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing. "Finally," he muttered, voice rough with relief. "The law's come." From the rising sun, deputies appeared, silhouetted like sentinels on the horizon. Sheriff Hawthorne led the charge, spurs gleaming and pistols ready. The outlaw and his gang, emboldened by their previous night, hadn't expected reinforcements so soon. Panic flickered across their faces.